On today's video, we're going to go over 5 fishing hacks, and number 5 really might save you some fishing heartache. Hey there outdoor YouTubers, it's Dave Knetter from Knetter's Practical Outdoors, and like I said earlier, we're going to go over 5 fishing hacks or tricks that'll make life out on the water a little easier, a little simpler, a little more efficient for you, and one of them might even save you from losing the fish of a lifetime. So let's get started. Okay guys, number 1, alright, and these are in no particular order, but number 1, when you're out there fishing with spinning gear, and, you know, I know even you bass guys use spinning gear sometimes, but when you're out there fishing with spinning gear, right, okay, you open your bail, you make your cast, line goes out, okay, always close the bail by hand, all right. I know some of you guys maybe do this already, but I know a lot of guys out there, they make the cast, line goes out, and then they just go ahead and they crank the handle of their reel to close the bail, okay, and I'm telling you, that is causing you a lot of line problems, and you maybe didn't even realize what the cause of those line problems was, okay? And I'll tell you, this is what happens, all right? You cast out, right? Open the bail, you make your cast, line goes out, okay? And when you just go ahead and crank it to close the bail, you're closing that bail under a very slack line condition. This line can jump around and go to a lot of places, okay, that it's not supposed to go. And at the very least, it can easily make a loop in your line. Okay, so you get that loop. Well, now you're retrieving the bait. You maybe didn't even notice it. And now the next time you go to cast, when that line comes off the spool, a lot of times it'll grab that loop and it'll come off, and there'll be this rat nest that comes out with it. And I know this has happened to you guys. You know, it happens to everybody from time to time. But that is the reason that is happening a lot. It's from the actual cast before, when the bail closed, it formed a small loop, and that loop got grabbed by the line on the next cast, and it came off kind of prematurely. That loop came off while it was still underneath some other line, so it wound up pulling a bunch of line out with it and making a big mess. When you close the bail by hand, you can do it nice and smooth, okay? But when you close the bail by cranking the reel handle, a lot of times it takes a certain amount of pressure to overcome that trip mechanism, all right, and then once it does, a lot of times it spins like a half a revolution or even a full revolution around under that slack line condition, and that's where these little loops are forming. That's where the line is kind of getting twisted around the bail. Okay, so what I like to do, I make the cast, right, open the bail up, make the cast, the line is going off, and right before the lure hits the water, I'll actually have the line in my hand, and I'll just kind of slow it down, okay? Almost like if I was fishing with a bait caster, you know, you're fishing with a bait caster, just as the lure is about to hit the water, you're kind of thumbing it down, slowing that line down, so you don't get excess line coming off the spool, right? Well, I kind of do the same thing with spinning gear. Right as that lure is about to hit, I'll just kind of slow that line down, reach down, close the bail by hand, give the line a little pull, and then I'm sure that there's no loops, there's no issues, okay? So, when you close the bail by hand and pay attention to that line on the spool, you have a much better chance of avoiding line issues. Number 2, if I'm fishing with worms or crawlers, I'll actually separate them from the dirt before I go out fishing. So, I'll just open up the crawlers, alright, dump them out onto a piece of cardboard, then I'll just take a different container, put the crawlers in that container. Sometimes I'll even go as far as to kind of rinse them out and dump the dirty water out, so I just kind of have good clean crawlers with no dirt in this second container. All right, and then you can just take the piece of cardboard, kind of bend it, put the dirt back in, and then at the end of the day of fishing, any crawlers you have left over can go back in the dirt. I know some of you guys are saying, what kind of fisherman are you where you're afraid to get your hands a little dirty? Okay, well, that's kind of a benefit to doing this, but it's not really the reason I do it. Now, hey, it's nice not to get all that, moist black dirt on your fingers, right? You're not rubbing it on your shirt or your pant leg or the carpeting on your boat or whatever. But the main reason I do it, and I don't do this all the time, okay? If I'm just kind of going out and I'm not really sure if I'm going to use worms or crawlers, even though I have some on me in the boat, I won't necessarily do this, okay? But if I'm going out, say, fishing for bluegills, and I'm really confident that the bluegills are biting, I'm going to go out fishing for a while, sometimes I will go ahead and do this, mostly so I can check and make sure the bait is good and fresh, check and make sure that I have enough of the bait, and also, once I'm out fishing, it's a lot easier to locate the worms, get rebaited, okay, and get that setup back out there and catch some more fish. All right, number 3, get yourself a day tackle box or a most commonly used tackle box. Now, I know a lot of you guys out there maybe only have like one tackle box, okay, and that's perfectly great. You've already got your day tackle box. You've already got your most commonly used tackle box all set for you already. But a lot of us guys have probably way too much tackle, way more tackle than we should have, all right? Way more tackle than we can fit in our boat, way more tackle than we can fit in our tackle bag. So what I like to do if I'm going out fishing on a lake and I have a pretty good idea of what I'm going to be doing, like I'm going to be going out and it's like, okay, I'm going to be trolling for walleyes. So I'm going to put some spinners in this tackle box. I'm going to maybe put some flatfish in this tackle box. And then, when I get over to this one end of the lake, I'll probably stop and maybe I'll cast for some pike. So then I'm going to take and I'm going to put maybe some bigger pike baits in here, maybe some spoons, maybe some bigger crankbaits, that sort of thing. And then, if that all kind of falls through, maybe I'm going to check up in the shallows and see if there's any bass around. I'm taking, maybe some of my favorite bass baits and I'm sticking it in here, all right? And now I've got this tackle box all set up, okay? I'm just going to have it sitting out, nice and easy to get to in the boat, all right? So now I'm not rifling through my tackle bag looking for a certain specific thing. I'm not rifling through the compartments in my boat, looking for some of these boxes that I might have stowed here and there in the boat. So I just find it really helps to kind of piece together a box that's kind of set up for the day of fishing that you intend on having, okay? I know it doesn't always work out that way, and that's why you got to have all that other tackle in the boat with you too. But, a lot of times I do have a pretty good idea of what I'm going to be doing. I know you guys too, and it just saves you a little time searching for tackle out in the boat. Okay guys, before we move on to number 4 and number 5, we're going to take a quick time out with a word from Camaro's Crawlers. Alright guys, a lot of non-essential businesses have been asked to shut down because of the coronavirus. My buddy Ronnie Camaro, he runs a small bait shop out of his parents' house where he lives. His bait shop did fall under those non-essential shutdown guidelines until now. Camaro's Crawlers Bait Shop now sells essential food items, and this allows Camaro's Crawlers to remain open. Now, I wouldn't say that Camaro's Crawlers carries a wide array of food items, alright? I'd probably characterize it as more of a narrow array of food items. Specifically, Camaro's Crawlers carries frozen pizzas and Coca-Cola. Now, Camaro's Crawlers still carries all the bait for you fishermen, alright? He still has the crawlers, he still has the leeches, he still has the minnows. And, again this summer, Camaro's Crawlers is carrying the Walleye Extra Value meal, alright? And then he also has the wood ticks when they're in season. So everything else is just the same as it always was. You walk in through Ronnie's dad's walk-in basement, and he's got the bait refrigerator right there. He's got the minnow tank right there, and that's where you get your bait, just the same as you always have, all right? Ronnie did want me to mention that the freezer with all the different types of frozen foods, that's his mom and dad's freezer. The food in that freezer is not for sale. And also, until further notice, Ronnie has asked that only the customers that are over the age of 21 shop at Camaro's Crawlers, okay? Because of the coronavirus, that's just to kind of protect the customers, all right? So if you're under the age of 21 and you're looking to get some frozen pizzas and crawlers, you're just going to have to find a buyer. So come on down to Camaro's Crawlers for all your essential frozen pizza, Coca-Cola, and fishing bait needs. Alright guys, number 4. Okay, this is just a simple trick on how to remove line twists from your line. Alright, now the plan would be to never get line twists in your line to begin with. Alright, but things don't always go according to plan, right? We all know that as fishermen. Even when you're doing things right, okay, even when you're using good swivels, even when you're maybe just fishing with crankbaits, things happen that give you line twists, okay? Certainly any kind of lure that actually spins, like spinners, and I don't just mean the spinner blade, but even the body of the spinner can sometimes spin as you're retrieving it. That can induce line twists. Spoons, okay, they kind of spin in the water. They can induce line twists. Sometimes when you're reeling in small fish, okay, they'll kind of come in spinning. They'll induce line twists. Sometimes even when you're fishing with a crankbait, okay, a crankbait really should never give you line twists, but maybe you're trolling along and you pick up a zebra mussel or you pick up a little twig or something, and now that lure's back there just spinning, all right? You reel it in and all of a sudden you got these line twists, you know, and you know the kind I'm talking about, guys, right? As soon as you give that line some slack, it just kind of rolls up on itself. Well, how do you get those line twists out? All right, well, there's a really simple way to do it. All you do is you take your rod and you take all the hardware off the end of it, okay? The lure, the swivel, any kind of snaps that you have on it, any kind of sinkers, and you just have your bare line. So now you're out in the boat and you're kind of moving along at maybe a trolling speed, and you just take the end of that line that has nothing on it and you just kind of feed it out. Set it down in the water, let the water grab it, kind of feed it out, and let it go off back behind the boat, just like you would if you were trolling. And let out as much line, plus a little more, that you would normally use with that rig, okay? If you are casting with this setup, let out a cast and a half. If you're trolling with this setup, let out as much line as you normally would when you're trolling, plus a little bit more. So now you've got all that line out behind the boat, okay, there's nothing on that line, and then you go ahead, pinch that line between your fingers, and just reel it in, okay? And kind of keep a good pinch on the line, and all those twists that are in the line, they're just going to roll right off the end of the line as you're reeling it in, okay? Just reel it all the way in, and like I say, all those twists are just going to roll right out, right off the end of the line, and they'll be gone. Go ahead, reattach the hardware, and get back to fishing. Alright guys, number 5, okay? And this is the one that I talked about earlier that might really save you some fishing heartache, okay? This is the one that really might save you from losing the fish of a lifetime, alright? And what it is just the notion that you need to inspect your line guides probably once a year. Now some of you guys might not realize it, but you can actually get grooves, burrs, corrosion on the inside of your line guides, okay? And when you get that sort of thing happening, it's going to reduce your casting distance, and maybe even more importantly, it can damage your fishing line, okay? It can cause your line to be severely compromised and break off when you got that fish of a lifetime on, okay? So we do not want that to happen. So you need to inspect these line guides, all right? Now the main culprit is usually going to be this tip line guide, okay? That's the one that gets worked over pretty good. You know, if you're out, say, trolling for several hours, okay, and that rod is just bouncing along all day long and that line is just kind of rubbing on it, your fishing line can actually start to cause a little groove or a little nick in your line guide. And I'll tell you, especially if you're using like these low diameter, you know, super lines or these low diameter braids. Now, I've commonly seen it more in some of these older all metal guides. That's where I've seen, you know, most of the grooves being cut and stuff. A lot of these more modern guides, you know, these ceramic guides, hold up a lot better. But even if you do have good ceramic guides, sometimes they can crack, okay? So you're going to have to look around for that too. So how do you go about doing that? All right. Well, I know a lot of guys talk about using Q-tips. All right. They talk about taking a Q-tip and running it inside the line guide, and then if there's any kind of burr or a groove, it'll kind of grab some of that cotton off that Q-tip, and then you can kind of see it kind of snags on it. But I'll tell you, I have had grooves that I could physically see in like the tip guide on fishing poles, and you can run a Q-tip in there and run it at all different angles, round and round, in and out, and the groove isn't really enough to snag anything off that Q-tip. So I really don't like using Q-tips for that, because I haven't had a lot of luck. Even with grooves and nicks that I could see, they don't necessarily pick those things up. So all I like to do is just take the line that's on the pole already oftentimes, or you can just take a small piece of the line and just kind of run it around the line guide, okay? And if there's any kind of nick or groove in it, it's gonna like kind of snag and hesitate. But if that line is just circling around the inside of that line guide and it's not being hung up, and it's just traveling around the inside of that guide nice and smooth, you know you've got a good guide that hasn't been compromised. Now the bigger ones, you can do the same thing. You can kind of run it in and around the inside of the line guide and kind of feel for any thing that it snags on. But the bigger ones you can also fit your finger in too, right? You can just kind of run it all around and just feel for those nicks, grooves, or maybe even cracks in the line guide. And if you do find a bad line guide, you're going to want to get that taken care of, okay? You don't want to fish with a fishing pole that has compromised line guides, right? With gouges, nicks, burrs, anything like that. You don't want to risk that line being damaged and losing that fish of a lifetime, okay? Now, if it's the tip line guide, that's usually not too difficult to replace, all right? But if it's anything other than the tip, you're just going to have to kind of assess how important that fishing pole is to you if you do want to go to the trouble of getting that line guide fixed, or just move on to a different fishing pole. The same thing goes for any of the other contact parts on your reel, okay? You want to kind of feel around that upper lip of the spool, make sure there's no burrs or snags or grooves in that. All around your bail, okay? You want to make sure there's no burrs or nicks on that bail. And then also, you also want to check the bail roller, okay? And I'll kind of do it with just the line again. I'll give it some slack line, and I'll just kind of run that line back and forth around that bail roller and feel for anything that it might be snagging on, okay? You want all these parts to be nice and smooth. And it's the same thing with your bait caster. You kind of want to check any of the line contact points to make sure they're nice and smooth. Specifically on the bait caster, it's going to be right here. Just kind of run that line, in and around where it comes out of the reel. Make sure there's no burrs or grooves that it would be snagging on. Okay, there's 5 fishing hacks or tricks for you guys. And also, guys, remember to hunt, fish, laugh, repeat. This is Dave Knetter from Knetter's Practical Outdoors. Hey, thanks for watching, and God bless.